Snow drifts through the quiet streets of Boston, the city wrapped in a hush only winter can bring. A bridge looms above the frozen river, and there, beneath the flickering glow of a street lamp, a weary police officer stands beside his loyal German shepherd. His uniform is soaked, his eyes haunted by a storm far colder than the one around him. In the distance, a child's small figure appears, lost, trembling, clutching a box of candy. Two strangers, one broken and one innocent, about to cross paths in a moment that will change both their lives forever. Where are you watching from tonight? Tell us in the comments. And may this story warm your heart wherever you are. Have a beautiful day. The rain had turned the town of Harborfield into a trembling reflection of the sea. Every streetlight flickered beneath the downpour, each droplet glinting like a shard of glass before vanishing into the puddled streets. Wind roared through the alleyways, rattling metal signs and tearing leaves from the skeletal trees that lined the river. And there, above the restless current of the Hudson Inlet, stood Officer Ethan Ward on the Jackson Bridge, a dark silhouette against a storm-painted sky. Ethan was 39, tall and broad-shouldered, with the quiet posture of a man who had spent too long carrying things no one else could see. His uniform, once pressed and proud, clung heavy with rain. His hair, brown streaked with gray, plastered against his forehead. His face bore the deep, deliberate lines of someone who had seen more loss than victory, and behind his gray-blue eyes there was a silence that no thunder could drown. For 15 years, he had served Harborfield Police Department, a man of discipline, instinct, and heart. But all of that had vanished the week the corruption scandal broke. The papers called him the crooked cop of Harborfield, the man who took bribes from corporate developers. The irony was bitter. Ethan had spent his life exposing men like that. Yet here he was, stripped of badge, dignity, and faith. The real criminal, his former captain, had vanished overseas, leaving Ethan's signature on every forged document. By the time the truth surfaced, no one cared to listen. And that night, on the bridge where he had once saved a drowning boy, Ethan found himself staring down into the same black water, wondering if perhaps it was time he joined it. Beside him stood Rex, his German shepherd partner, 5 years old, powerful yet gentle, his coat a deep black and tan that gleamed even through the rain. Rex was trained for search and rescue, his senses sharp, his loyalty absolute. Yet even a dog could sense despair. He whimpered softly, nudging Ethan's leg, tail low, golden eyes searching for an answer his handler refused to give. Ethan stroked the dog's head absent-mindedly, his gloved fingers trembling. "Go home, boy," he whispered, voice breaking against the wind. "You did your part." But Rex didn't move. He planted himself firmly beside his partner, a living anchor between Ethan and the abyss. The storm raged harder, lightning slashing across the water. Harborfield shimmered in the distance, a smear of light on the horizon. It looked almost beautiful and terribly far away. Ethan's thoughts turned inward, to his father, a police sergeant who had died in the line of duty, to his mother, who had once told him that faith wasn't about religion, but about standing when you wanted to fall. He wondered what she would say now, watching him like this. He had tried to stand. He really had. But every time he did, the world seemed determined to push him back down. He gripped the cold, railing, leaning forward. The wind clawed at his coat. One more step, and it would all be over. No trials, no pity, no more shame. Then a voice broke through the storm. "Sir, are you going to jump?" Ethan froze. For a moment he thought he'd imagined it. The sound was too small, too fragile to belong to this world of thunder. He turned, and through the curtain of rain, he saw her. A little girl stood a few yards away, her figure half lit by the dim orange glow of the bridge lamps. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, thin, with chestnut hair clinging to her face in wet strands, and eyes the color of green glass, bright, searching, unafraid. She wore a torn pink raincoat, clearly second-hand, and clutched a small cardboard box against her chest, the kind used to sell candy bars door to door. Ethan's breath caught. "Kid, what are you doing here?" His voice came out rough, nearly swallowed by the rain. She took a hesitant step closer, her boots squelching in a puddle. Trying to sell candy, she said matter-of-factly, though her voice trembled with cold. But nobody's buying tonight. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the faint bruise of exhaustion beneath her eyes, the trembling of her small fingers. You shouldn't be out here, he said sharply. Go home, it's not safe. I know, she replied softly, but I needed to make enough for rent. My aunt says if we don't pay tomorrow, we'll have to leave. Ethan's jaw tightened. There was no anger in his face, only pain, the kind that recognized itself in another. You live near here? She nodded toward the far end of the bridge, down on Bay Street, near the diner. Then, after a pause, her gaze dropped to the railing. Are you really gonna jump? The question hit him like a physical blow. For the first time in weeks, Ethan couldn't find words. The rain hissed between them, the bridge creaking like an old ghost. You should mind your own business, he muttered, but the girl didn't flinch. Instead, she set her candy box down on the wet pavement and stepped closer. My mom used to say that sometimes when people get too quiet, they need someone to talk for them, she said. Something twisted in Ethan's chest. Where's your mom now? The girl's lips parted, her voice thinning to a whisper. She went to heaven 2 months ago. He closed his eyes. I'm sorry. She had cancer, the girl continued, her tone oddly calm, as if she'd said the words so many times they'd lost their sharpness. Before she got really sick, she told me that our life isn't only ours, that every time we help someone, even a little, it means something. She smiled faintly, teeth chattering. So, maybe if I sell enough candy, I'll be helping her too. Rex whined again and trotted toward the girl, tail swishing cautiously. She laughed, the sound fragile but warm, and crouched to pet him. He's beautiful, she murmured. What's his name? Rex, Ethan said quietly. He's a police dog. Like you. He hesitated. Not anymore. The girl tilted her head, studying him with that unsettling honesty only children possess. You still look like one. Ethan almost smiled. A flicker, then gone. The wind howled, carrying the smell of rain and river water. What's your name, kid? Lily, she said, standing again. Lily Parker. The name lingered in his mind. Parker. A name that clawed at something half-remembered. He pushed it aside. Lily reached into her box and pulled out a slightly crushed chocolate bar. This one's my favorite, she said, extending it toward him. I was saving it, but I think you need it more. He stared at the small, trembling hand before him. He, a man who had once commanded respect, wealth, and a badge, now being offered mercy by a child in the rain. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Why are you doing this? He whispered. Because, Lily said simply, if you fall, maybe someone who needs your light won't see it anymore. The words sank deep, piercing through the layers of guilt and despair that had been suffocating him. He took the candy bar, his fingers brushing hers, and something inside him cracked, not broken, but open. He fell to his knees, shoulders shaking, tears mixing with rain. Rex pressed his body against him, whining softly, while Lily stood nearby, silent but steady, as if holding the whole storm back just by being there. When he finally looked up, she was smiling, not with joy but with certainty. You're not going to jump now, right? He shook his head, unable to speak. Good, she said firmly, picking up her candy box. Then maybe you can walk me home. It's scary at night. He almost laughed, the first sound of life he'd made in weeks. Yeah, he said softly. Yeah, I can do that. As they began to walk, the bridge stretched behind them like a wound slowly closing. Harborfield's lights shimmered ahead, faint but steady. Rex trotted between them, tail swaying, every step echoing against the wet pavement. Ethan glanced down at Lily. Do you always sell candy this late? She shrugged. Sometimes. My aunt works nights at the diner, so nobody really knows when I'm gone. It's okay, I have Rex now. Ethan smiled faintly at that. For the first time since his fall from grace, the world didn't feel entirely hopeless. The girl's small hand slipped into his, warm despite the cold. Together they crossed the bridge, a broken man, a lost child, and a loyal dog, all unknowingly saving each other beneath the relentless rain. And as they stepped off the bridge, Ethan glanced back one last time at the river below, the place that could have been his end. Instead, it had become his beginning. He didn't know it yet, but the name Lily Parker would soon reopen every wound he'd tried to bury, and perhaps, in doing so, heal them all. The storm did not stop when they crossed the bridge. It only softened, as if exhausted by its own fury. The streets of Harborfield glistened under the orange streetlights, water running along the gutters like tiny rivers carrying away the night's sorrow. Ethan Ward walked beside the little girl named Lily, her small hand still wrapped around his. The raincoat she wore clung to her thin frame, and every few steps she coughed, a small, fragile sound swallowed by the wind. Rex trotted close to them, his thick fur matted with water, tail lowered, but his eyes ever alert, glancing between the man and the child, as though ensuring neither vanished again. They passed the old diner on Bay Street, its neon sign sputtering faintly through the fog. Maggie's Home Grill, a place Ethan had once gone to for late-night coffee during patrol shifts. Through the steamy glass, he saw the owner, Maggie Holt, wiping the counter. She was a heavy-set woman in her mid-50s with curly red hair streaked with silver, and the kind of stern face that softened only when she smiled. She noticed Ethan outside, and her eyes widened, recognition flashing, followed by concern. Maggie had known him before the scandal. She had poured him coffee, heard his jokes, and read the headlines that destroyed his name. She pushed open the door, rain splashing around her boots. "Ethan Ward," she called. "Lord above, you look like a ghost. What in heaven's name are you doing out here?" He hesitated, not sure he had an answer that wouldn't sound like a lie. "Just helping someone get home," he said finally, glancing down at Lily. Maggie's gaze softened when she saw the girl. "You poor thing, you'll catch your death. Get in here, both of you." Inside, the diner smelled of coffee and fried onions, and the air hummed with the faint tune of an old jukebox in the corner. Ethan hadn't realized how cold he'd been until the warmth hit his skin. Maggie returned with 2 steaming mugs of cocoa and a towel for Lily. "Here," she said, setting the cup down. "Drink this before you turn into an icicle." "Thank you," Lily said politely, her voice small but bright. Maggie smiled. "Polite too. Not many like you left in this town." Then, glancing at Ethan, she added quietly, "I've heard things, you know, about you. I never believed them." Ethan looked down, unsure what to say. "You might be the only one," he murmured. "Maybe. But the Ethan I knew once dragged a boy out of the river with his bare hands. That's not the kind of man who takes bribes." She said it matter-of-factly, not as comfort, but as truth. Then she patted his shoulder and turned to pour more coffee. Lily, meanwhile, was busy feeding bits of her chocolate bar to Rex, who accepted them with dignified patience. She giggled as his wet nose nudged her palm. "He's so gentle," she said. "I had a puppy once, but my aunt said we couldn't keep him. He barked too much, and the landlord complained." Ethan watched her. "Your aunt? Does she live nearby?" Lily nodded. "A few blocks away. She works nights at the diner down by the harbor. She says it's the only job she can get since my mom. Since she went to heaven." Her eyes drifted to the rain-streaked window. "Your mom?" Ethan repeated softly. "What was her name?" "Eleanor Parker," she said without hesitation. "She worked with numbers, at some big company downtown. She was really smart, but she got sick, and after that, everything got hard." The name hit Ethan like a silent gunshot. Parker? Eleanor Parker. His mind raced. The financial officer mentioned in his own case file. The one who had died suddenly before the trial. He had never met her, only seen the name on reports. He stared at Lily, feeling the edges of something bigger than coincidence press in on him. He cleared his throat, forcing his voice steady. "Your mom worked for Richard Parker, right?" Lily looked up, surprised. "You know my uncle?" His heart sank. "Uncle." "I heard of him," he said carefully. "He's your mom's brother?" She nodded. "He visits sometimes. He brings food and helps Aunt Olivia pay rent. He says he's really busy with work, so I don't see him much." Ethan leaned back, the warmth of the diner fading from his chest. Richard Parker, the same name that appeared in the corruption documents. It was his signature that had mirrored Ethan's on the falsified accounts. The storm outside no longer seemed random. It was as if fate had carried this child across his path for a reason he wasn't ready to face. Maggie returned with a slice of pie for Lily, and a silent look that told Ethan she saw more in his eyes than he wanted her to. "You've got that look again," she said softly. "The one from years ago. The one before you went after that drug ring up north. I know that look means trouble's coming." He tried to smile, but couldn't. "Maybe," he said. "But maybe it's a chance, too." After they finished, Maggie lent Lily an old sweater and packed a small paper bag with muffins. "You take care of this one, Officer Ward," she said with a wink. "And don't argue. I still remember when you saved my nephew." As they stepped back into the rain, Lily clutched the bag tightly, smiling at Maggie through the glass. Ethan adjusted his coat and whistled for Rex. The dog shook himself, sending droplets everywhere, then fell into step beside them once more. Bay Street at night was a maze of narrow houses with paint peeling from the salt air. When they reached the small apartment building with flickering porch lights, Lily pointed. "That's where we live, 3rd floor, apartment 3B. Ethan glanced up. The building leaned slightly to one side, windows fogged, the kind of place where every sound traveled through the walls. "Does your aunt know you're out here this late?" Lily bit her lip. "Not really. She works until 2. I just wanted to help." He knelt so they were eye to eye. "You did more than help tonight, Lily." His voice was quiet, steady. "You saved me." Her eyes widened, and then she smiled shyly. "Then we're even. You walked me home." A sound came from the stairwell, a door creaking open. A woman appeared, holding a dish towel and wearing an old diner uniform. Olivia Parker was in her late 30s, tall but weary-looking, her brown hair pinned back carelessly. Her face was pale with sleeplessness, the corners of her mouth etched with worry. When she saw Lily, her expression softened into relief and frustration all at once. "Lily Parker, where have you been?" she scolded, rushing down the steps. "I was about to call the police." Ethan raised his hand slightly. "That would have been awkward," he said gently. "She's safe now. I found her near the bridge." Olivia froze, recognition dawning. "You're—" She didn't finish the sentence. Everyone in Harborfield knew his face, but instead of disgust, her eyes showed something closer to pity. "Thank you," she said after a moment, her voice quieter. "I don't know what I'd do if something happened to her." Ethan nodded, adjusting his wet hat. "She's brave," he said. "Too brave for her age." Olivia smiled faintly and rested a hand on her niece's shoulder. "Comes from her mother." Then, turning to Ethan again, she hesitated. "If you ever need a meal, officer, come by the diner tomorrow. I owe you one." He wanted to refuse, but something about her tone made it sound less like charity and more like shared understanding, the kind of offer one broken person gives another. "I might take you up on that," he said. As Olivia led Lily upstairs, Ethan stood on the sidewalk watching the faint light in their window flicker on. Rex pressed against his leg, head tilted, water dripping from his muzzle. "I know, boy," Ethan murmured, his hand resting on the dog's neck. "We're not done here." The rain had finally stopped. Harborfield lay silent, wrapped in fog. Somewhere in the darkness, Ethan felt the threads of his ruined life tightening into something new. Fragile, uncertain, but alive. And high above the river, on the bridge where he had nearly died, the wind whispered through the steel beams as if echoing a child's words. "Maybe someone still needs your light." He didn't know it yet, but the name Eleanor Parker would soon reveal that the same family who had destroyed his career now held the key to clearing his name, and to the redemption of them all. Morning arrived shyly over Harborfield, painting the flooded streets with pale gold. The storm had passed, leaving the air washed clean and fragile. Ethan Ward sat on a park bench across from the harbor, his uniform still damp, the smell of salt and rain clinging to it. Rex lay at his feet, half asleep, muzzle resting on his paws. The German shepherd's fur glimmered in the weak sunlight, and when Ethan looked down, he realized the dog had curled instinctively closer to him, as if afraid he might vanish again. Ethan had spent most of the night wandering, unable to return to the small apartment he used to rent. It didn't feel like home anymore. Nothing did. In his hand, he still held the melted remains of the chocolate bar Lily had given him. The wrapper was damp, the candy half squashed, yet it felt sacred, a relic of something pure he didn't dare destroy. He took a slow breath, watching the gulls circle over the gray waves. Across the street stood Harborfield Diner, where Olivia Parker worked the morning shift. He saw her through the window, tall, thin, hair pulled back into a messy bun, a dark blue apron tied around her waist. Even from a distance, he could sense the fatigue in her movements, the way she smiled politely at customers, but never for herself, the way she rubbed her wrist between trays as though the ache had become part of her. Rex's ears perked up as Ethan stood. "Come on, boy," he murmured. "Time to return a promise." Inside, the diner smelled of bacon and burnt toast. The chatter was low. Truck drivers, fishermen, a few locals reading newspapers. Ethan took a seat by the window. Olivia noticed him after a moment, surprise flashing in her eyes before she forced a small smile and came over. "You again," she said softly. "Guess I owe you that breakfast." "Guess so," he replied, and for the first time in months, there was almost a trace of humor in his tone. She poured him coffee, her hands steady despite her exhaustion. "Lily told me everything," Olivia said after a moment. "About last night, about you." She couldn't stop talking about Rex. Rex lifted his head proudly at his name, tail tapping the floor. Olivia laughed faintly. "He's quite the gentleman. My niece thinks he's magic." "She's got a good heart," Ethan said. "Too good for the world she's in." Olivia looked down. "You're not wrong." She hesitated, then added quietly, "It's been hard since Eleanor passed, Lily's mother, my cousin. I promised to take care of her, but some nights I think I'm the one being kept alive by that kid." Her voice cracked slightly, and Ethan noticed for the first time the small scar running along her jawline, an old wound, maybe from an accident or something worse. She caught him staring and looked away quickly. "Long story," she murmured. He didn't push. Instead, he said, "Lily mentioned her uncle, Richard Parker. At that," Olivia froze mid-motion, the coffee pot trembling slightly in her hand. "You know Richard?" "I've heard of him," Ethan said carefully. "He used to be in corporate finance, right?" Her mouth tightened. "Still is. Too much money, too many connections. He helps us sometimes, pays a month's rent here and there. But I never liked the way he talks about Lily. Like she's something he owns because of what happened to Eleanor. He's controlling. The kind of man who smiles while you drown." Ethan's stomach tightened. "You think he's dangerous?" "I think he's desperate," she said. "And desperate people do dangerous things." Before Ethan could answer, a man at the counter turned slightly, watching them. He was in his 40s, lean, wearing a brown trench coat and wire-rimmed glasses. His hair was slicked back neatly, but his hands, large, veined, trembling, told a story of nerves or guilt. He stirred his coffee without drinking it. When Olivia glanced his way, her face paled. "That's him," she whispered. "One of Richard's men. He shows up every time rent's late." Ethan's pulse quickened. "Stay calm," he said quietly. "What's his name?" "Gordon," she said. "Gordon Hasker. He pretends to be a real estate broker, but he's not. Richard's been buying up half this neighborhood under fake names." The man rose from his stool, eyes meeting Ethan's. For a moment, neither moved. Then Gordon smiled, too polite to be friendly. "Officer Ward," he said in a low, practiced voice. "I thought you left Harborfield. Surprised to see you back." Ethan forced a neutral expression. "Just passing through." "Sure," Gordon said. "Funny, though. Seems everywhere Richard's name pops up, so does yours. Coincidence?" Rex growled softly, the sound deep and warning. Gordon's smile faltered for just a second. "Better keep that dog leashed. Never know when something might bite back." He tossed a bill on the counter and left without another word. Olivia exhaled shakily. "He'll tell Richard," she said. "You should go before—" "I'm not running anymore," Ethan interrupted. His voice wasn't angry. It was steady, grounded in something Lily's words had reawakened. "He framed me once. I'm not giving him the chance again." Rex stood beside him, alert and waiting. Olivia stared at Ethan, as though seeing the man from the newspaper fade into the one who once saved lives. After a long moment, she nodded. "If you're serious about clearing your name, there's something you should know." "What?" "Eleanor kept records," she whispered. "She was terrified of Richard before she died. I found a notebook in her things. Just numbers, dates, weird transfers. I thought it was nothing, but maybe... Do you still have it? She hesitated. At the apartment. But if Richard finds out, he won't, Ethan said. I'll make sure of it. Later that afternoon, he followed Olivia and Lily back to their building. The hallway smelled of damp wood and detergent. Olivia unlocked the door, gesturing to an old chest by the wall. Everything that was Eleanor's is in there. While she went to check on Lily, Ethan knelt and lifted the lid. Inside were old photos. Eleanor with Lily as a baby, smiling despite the fatigue in her eyes, and beneath them, a small notebook bound in faded blue leather. When he opened it, the handwriting was neat but hurried, columns of figures, initials, and phrases like offshore accounts, duplicate ledgers, and Hartman Trust. Ethan's pulse quickened. Richard Parker had used this same alias in multiple shell companies. Proof. He closed the notebook quickly as Lily entered the room, holding Rex's leash. He wants to go outside, she said, smiling. He keeps staring at the door. Ethan forced a calm tone. Sure thing, kiddo. Just a quick walk. Outside, the afternoon sky had cleared completely, sunlight spilling over the wet pavement. Harbor Field looked almost peaceful again, but Ethan's mind raced. Richard Parker wasn't just corrupt. He was still active, still watching. And if Eleanor had gathered this much before she died, her death might not have been natural at all. At the edge of the street, he knelt beside Rex and whispered, "We're getting close, boy, but we're walking on a knife's edge now." Rex gave a low, steady bark, a sound that felt like agreement. When they returned, Lily sat by the window, drawing with a broken crayon on an old envelope. On the paper, she had sketched a dog, a man, and a little girl standing on a bridge under rain. She held it up proudly. "It's us," she said. "The night we met." Ethan smiled faintly, the kind that hurt more than it healed. That's a good memory to keep. Outside, the first gulls cried over the harbor again, and the sun slipped lower, gilding the world in soft light. But somewhere far beyond that peace, a phone rang in an office with marble floors and silent men. Richard Parker lifted the receiver, listened to Gordon's brief report, and smiled thinly. "So," he said, his voice calm as ice, "Officer Ward is alive. Perfect." Ethan didn't know it yet, but the storm he thought had ended was only gathering strength, and this time it had a name. Night returned to Harbor Field with a heavy quiet that made every creak of the dock sound like memory. The street lamps hummed softly, halos of amber light floating over the slick pavement. Ethan Ward stood outside the Parker apartment, the small blue notebook clenched in his hand. He hadn't opened it since morning, but its weight felt heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. Inside that notebook was truth, the kind that could save him, or destroy more lives. Rex sat beside him, tail brushing the steps, ears perked toward every sound in the narrow alley. Ethan finally stepped inside. Olivia Parker was seated by the small kitchen window, folding laundry, her face lit by the dull orange glow of the streetlight outside. She looked older than her 30-something years, her eyes ringed by sleepless nights. "I was hoping you'd come back," she said without looking up. "Lily's asleep." Ethan nodded, removing his cap. "I need to talk about Eleanor." That name was a ghost in the air. Olivia's hands stilled. "You found something, didn't you?" He set the notebook on the table. "She kept records, dates, payments, companies. Everything connects to your brother." Olivia's face went pale. "Richard?" Her voice trembled, the name half a plea and half disbelief. "He said he was helping her, paying her medical bills." "He was using her," Ethan said softly. "She discovered he was laundering money through shell companies. When she tried to stop him, he made it look like I was the one behind it. She tried to protect both of us and paid for it." Olivia pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes glistening. "I knew she was scared before she died. She'd call me late at night, say things like, 'If something happens, promise me you'll look after Lily.' But I didn't understand. I thought she was just afraid of being sick." Ethan's gaze softened. She was afraid of him. The silence stretched between them until Rex broke it with a soft growl, turning toward the door. Footsteps echoed in the hall. Ethan motioned for Olivia to stay quiet and stepped to the peephole. A man in a dark coat stood outside, pretending to light a cigarette. The same Gordon Hasker from the diner. But this time, there was another shadow behind him. "Two of them," Ethan whispered. "Stay with Lily." Olivia grabbed his sleeve. "Please don't make this worse." He shook his head. "I won't. I'll make it right." Ethan stepped out into the hallway, closing the door quietly behind him. The corridor smelled of old paint and cigarette smoke. Gordon looked up from his lighter, the flame flickering in his glasses. "Evening, Officer Ward," he said smoothly. "Still playing the hero?" "Depends who needs saving," Ethan replied. The second man stepped from the stairwell, bigger, bald, wearing a gray suit that didn't fit his rough frame. His face was marked with an old scar across the chin. "Mr. Parker wants a word," he said. "You can come quietly, or what?" Ethan cut in. "You'll add kidnapping to his list of crimes?" The larger man sneered and reached inside his coat. Before his hand could emerge, Rex lunged, teeth flashing. The man shouted, stumbling back, arm twisted as Ethan moved fast, disarming him with the efficiency of muscle memory. The gun clattered to the floor. Gordon cursed, stepping back, but Ethan leveled the weapon with steady precision. "Tell your boss," Ethan said coldly, "that if he wants to talk, he can come himself. Next time you show up here, you'll leave in cuffs." Rex growled again for emphasis. The two men exchanged a look, then retreated down the hall. The moment they vanished, Ethan exhaled slowly, tension slipping from his shoulders. He turned back into the apartment, locking the door behind him. Olivia was waiting, pale but composed. "Was that them?" "Yes," he said. "They won't bother you tonight." But he knew better. Richard Parker was too calculating to send only a warning. As Ethan sat down, the notebook still on the table, Olivia spoke quietly. "You can't stay here. If they find you, they'll hurt Lily just to make a point." "I'm not leaving her unprotected." "Then what?" she asked, her voice sharp now. "You'll sit here with a gun while he burns down the building?" Ethan hesitated. The truth was, he didn't have a plan, just instinct and guilt. He looked down at Rex, who had lain beside Lily's bedroom door, standing silent watch. "There's one person who might help," he said finally. "Someone I used to trust." "Who?" "Natalie Rhodes," he said. "Reporter. She used to cover corruption cases for the Boston Tribune. He paused, searching for the right word. "Worked together once." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Worked together?" "She was the reason some good men didn't die forgotten," Ethan replied simply. "If anyone can expose Richard, it's her." "Then find her," Olivia said. "But be careful. Richard's reach goes far." Ethan nodded. "I'll leave Rex here tonight. He'll keep watch." Olivia looked down at the German shepherd. "Are you sure he won't go mad without you?" Rex gave a low rumble, as if offended by the suggestion. Ethan smiled faintly. "He knows his job." He scribbled a phone number on a piece of paper and handed it to her. "If anything happens, call this. It's a secure line." Later that night, Ethan drove through the sleeping town, his old truck rattling along the empty streets. The radio murmured softly, half static, half blues. His mind kept drifting back to Lily, her fragile laughter, the way she had said, "Maybe someone needs your light." He gripped the wheel tighter. She deserved a world better than this one. He found Natalie Rhodes at a small newsroom office in downtown Boston. The sign on the door was faded, but her name was still there. When she opened it, she looked exactly as he remembered, sharp, tired, but unbroken. Natalie was in her mid-30s, with curly black hair tied loosely and green eyes that always looked like they were analyzing the truth behind everything. She wore an oversized flannel shirt over jeans, her desk cluttered with files and old coffee cups. "Ethan Ward," she said, stunned. "You're supposed to be in prison or dead." "Neither stuck," he said. She crossed her arms, wary. "Why are you here?" He placed the blue notebook on her desk. "Because someone framed me, and because a little girl's mother died trying to tell the truth." Natalie's eyes flickered as she skimmed the first page. "Eleanor Parker," she murmured, "Richard's assistant. She disappeared right before your case collapsed." "She didn't disappear," Ethan said. "She died, but not before leaving this." Natalie looked up, her voice softer now. "You think Richard had her killed?" "I know he did. And if we don't stop him, he'll do worse. Rex wasn't there to sense the tension, but the room itself seemed to hold its breath. Natalie closed the notebook carefully. "I'll help you," she said. "But Ethan, if we go after him, there's no turning back." I wasn't planning on turning back. Outside, Boston's skyline shimmered against the river, lights flickering like distant fireflies. The storm had ended, but in Ethan's chest, another one had just begun. By the time morning came, he would have allies again, and enemies who now knew exactly where to find him. The next morning dawned gray and restless, the air thick with the smell of brine and diesel from the harbor. Boston's skyline loomed in the distance, veiled by a mist that made every building look like a ghost of something larger. Ethan Ward sat on the edge of the pier, his elbows resting on his knees, watching the water slap gently against the wooden pylons. The night's conversation with Natalie had kept him awake, the weight of what they were about to do pressing on his chest like armor he couldn't remove. Natalie arrived just after 7, carrying a thermos and 2 paper cups. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said, her voice still husky from the cold. She wore a brown leather jacket over a gray turtleneck, her hair tucked behind one ear. The wind teased loose strands into her face. "You never did know how to rest when you had a case to solve." "I didn't know this was going to turn into one," he said, taking the cup she offered. "I thought I left all that behind when they took my badge." "You didn't leave it," she said, sitting beside him. "They just buried it. You're digging it back up." Ethan almost smiled. Natalie had that effect. Sharp words, but delivered with the kind of warmth that kept them from cutting too deep. She had once been his fiercest critic and his closest ally. They'd spent months working side by side years ago, chasing corruption cases through the city's underbelly. But after the scandal, she'd distanced herself, not out of doubt, but out of survival. "I ran the names from Eleanor's notebook," she continued, flipping through a small leather journal of her own. "Half of them tied to dummy corporations under Parker Investments, offshore accounts, property deals. But one thing stands out. A warehouse by the old docks, registered to a shell company called Apex Maritime Holdings." "Let me guess," Ethan said. "Richard Parker." Natalie nodded. "And here's the part you'll love. The address matches one of the places Eleanor marked in her entries, the pier near the carousel, where she used to take Lily to feed the gulls." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "Then that's where we start." Before leaving the city, he made one stop, back at Harborfield. Olivia answered the door looking pale, her hair undone, worry etched into every line of her face. "I didn't sleep," she admitted. "Every car that passed, I thought it was them." "They won't come back tonight," Ethan assured her. "But I need to borrow Lily for a while." Olivia blinked. "What? Why?" She mentioned a place she and her mother used to go. The pier near the carousel. "I think Eleanor left something there." Olivia hesitated, glancing toward the small table where Lily sat drawing. The girl looked up, eyes bright despite the circles under them. "You're going to find what Mom left, aren't you?" she asked. Ethan knelt down. "I think so, but I need your help, kiddo." Lily smiled, small but brave, and pulled on her raincoat. "Then let's go." Rex barked once, already waiting at the door. The drive to the pier took them an hour. The sky had turned a dull silver, the clouds heavy, but not yet raining. When they arrived, the old amusement park stretched before them, abandoned now, the carousel horses frozen mid-gallop under peeling paint. The pier itself creaked beneath their steps, worn by years of storms and salt. "This was our secret place," Lily said softly, walking ahead. "Mom said if I ever missed her, I could come here. We used to carve our initials on that bench." She pointed toward a weathered wooden bench near the railing. Ethan approached, running his hand along the backrest. Faded but visible were the letters E+L. Something stirred in his chest. "She left this for you," he murmured. Rex began sniffing around the area, tail low, nose twitching. Suddenly he let out a sharp bark, paws scraping against an old trash bin beside the bench. Ethan crouched and noticed a rusted panel at its base. The screws corroded but loose enough to remove. He pried it open with his knife. Inside, wrapped in a waterproof bag, was a small tin box. Lily gasped softly. "That's Mom's." Ethan opened it carefully. Inside lay a folded letter, and a small USB drive sealed in plastic. The handwriting on the envelope was trembling, but unmistakable. Eleanor Parker's. He unfolded the letter, his hand steady despite his racing pulse. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't finish what I started. My name is Eleanor Parker. My brother, Richard Parker, is guilty of crimes that will destroy lives. He used Officer Ethan Ward's name to cover his trail. Please, whoever finds this, protect my daughter, Lily, and help clear Ethan's name. He is innocent. Ethan's jaw tightened. He passed the letter to Natalie, who read it in silence. This is it, she said. This is enough to reopen everything. But before she could finish, Rex growled again. Low, dangerous. Ethan turned sharply. Down the pier, 2 black cars had stopped. Men stepped out, 3 of them dressed in dark suits, moving with deliberate coordination. The wind carried the glint of a gun beneath one of their coats. Natalie cursed under her breath. He found us! Get Lily behind me, Ethan ordered, his voice flat and calm. He scanned for exits, the carousel to the left, the pier stretching into open water. Trapped. The first man approached, tall, bald, and broad-shouldered. Not Gordon this time, but someone harder, colder. His name, Ethan would later learn, was Marcus Vale, Richard's new enforcer. Vale's face bore the scars of past violence, his left eye slightly clouded. He had the slow, assured gait of a man who enjoyed fear. Officer Ward, he called out, his voice deep and oddly polite. Mr. Parker wants his property back. Ethan straightened. Tell Parker it belongs to his sister, not him. Vale smiled faintly. Dead women don't own anything. Rex barked furiously, lunging forward until Ethan signaled him to hold. The dog's growl rolled through the air like thunder. Natalie's hand slipped into her jacket, pulling out her phone. Keep them talking, she whispered. I'm sending the files to my cloud drive. Ethan nodded, keeping his eyes on Vale. You really want to shoot a cop in broad daylight? Who said anything about shooting? Vale replied. Accidents happen near the water. He stepped forward, but before he could take another, Rex sprang. The German shepherd collided with him mid-stride, knocking him off balance. Shouts erupted as 2 men drew their weapons. Ethan fired once, hitting the dock's railing inches from their hands, enough to make them dive for cover. Natalie grabbed Lily and ran toward the carousel. The wooden horses creaked under the wind as she ducked behind them, clutching the child close. Ethan and Rex retreated toward the pier's end. Vale, recovering, snarled and wiped blood from his cheek. That dog's dead, he hissed. Not before you, Ethan shot back. For a moment, chaos consumed the pier, gunfire cracking, gulls scattering into the sky. Then, as sirens echoed faintly in the distance, Vale cursed and motioned his men to retreat. You just signed your own death warrant, Ward, he shouted before vanishing into one of the cars. Ethan stood still, chest heaving, rain finally beginning to fall again, slow, cold drops that hissed against the wooden planks. Rex limped slightly, fur matted, but when Lily ran to him, the dog licked her hand, tail wagging weakly. Natalie checked her phone. The upload went through, she said, breathless. If anything happens to us, the files are safe. Ethan picked up the fallen letter, tucking it safely inside his jacket. Then we're not running anymore, he said. We're taking this to the FBI. Behind them, the sea roared like a warning, but in Ethan's chest, something steadier had returned. Purpose. The kind that didn't fade with the storm. And as they drove away from the pier, the little girl who had once saved him clutched Rex's fur tightly and whispered, Mom would be proud of you too. The storm clouds had scattered by dawn, leaving a thin mist over Boston Harbor. The city was beginning to stir. Fishermen preparing their boats, vendors lifting metal shutters, the hum of traffic slowly filling the streets. But inside Natalie Rhodes's cramped newsroom, time seemed to stand still. The air was heavy with stale coffee and the faint buzz of computer monitors. On the central desk lay the USB drive they had recovered from Eleanor Parker's box. Small, ordinary, and yet powerful enough to shatter empires. Natalie stood by the window, staring out at the fog. She hadn't changed much since Ethan had last worked with her, yet the years had left subtle marks, faint lines at the corners of her eyes, a slight hardness in her jaw. She had become sharper, more deliberate, The idealism that once made her reckless had cooled into something quieter, conviction tempered by loss. She turned as Ethan entered, Rex padding faithfully at his side. The German shepherd's coat had dried overnight, though one of his paws was bandaged where he'd scraped it against the pier. Still, he walked with quiet dignity, head high, amber eyes alert to every sound. "You didn't sleep again," Natalie said, noticing the dark circles under Ethan's eyes. He shrugged. "Couldn't. Every time I close my eyes, I see that pier. We were lucky, Nat. Too lucky." She nodded, then gestured to the USB drive. "This is it, Ethan. The full ledger, transfer records, even video statements. It's enough to reopen your case and bury Richard Parker for good." Ethan sat opposite her, his movements slow, deliberate. "Then, let's go to the FBI." "I already called a contact," Natalie said. "Agent Maria Sullivan. She used to work financial crimes before transferring to federal investigations. Straightforward, relentless, and allergic to politics, which is exactly what we need." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You trust her?" Natalie smirked faintly. "She's my cousin." That drew a small laugh from him, the first in days. "All right, I'll take family over bureaucrats." "Don't get too excited," Natalie warned. "Maria's not the hugging type. Think of a human lie detector with better hair." Ethan glanced toward the window again, then back at her. "Richard won't stay quiet. We both know he's planning his next move." Natalie sighed. "I know. That's why we have to move fast. I'll meet Maria at noon, give her the data, and set up a press release for tonight. If Richard tries to silence you, the world will already know the truth." Ethan hesitated. "You mean to expose it publicly?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Full story. No redactions, no safe edits. The people deserve to know." Before Ethan could respond, the door creaked open. Lily stood there, holding Rex's leash. She wore one of Olivia's old sweaters, the sleeves too long, her brown hair tied in a messy ponytail. "Aunt Olivia told me to stay inside," she said, "but I didn't want you to leave without saying goodbye." Ethan knelt to meet her gaze. "I'm not leaving, kiddo. Just going to make sure bad people don't hurt anyone else." Lily nodded solemnly. "Mom used to say lies are like mold. They grow in the dark, so you're going to turn on the light, right?" Ethan's throat tightened. "Yeah," he whispered. "That's exactly what we're going to do." Rex licked Lily's hand, tail wagging. Natalie smiled at the sight, rare warmth breaking through the tension. "She's sharper than half the cops I've ever met," she said softly. Lily grinned. "That's because I listen." Ethan ruffled her hair. "Then promise me you'll listen to Olivia today. Stay with her, okay?" "I promise," she said. Then, after a pause, added, "Come back soon." Ethan exchanged a glance with Natalie. "I will," he said, though even he wasn't sure he believed it. By noon, they were walking up the marble steps of the Federal Building on Arlington Avenue. Inside, the hall smelled faintly of disinfectant and paper, bureaucratic sterility that hid the pulse of real danger. They were led to a conference room by a young officer who couldn't have been older than 25, clean-cut and polite. "Agent Sullivan will be with you shortly," he said, leaving them alone. Natalie placed her bag on the table, tapping her fingers anxiously. "She'll take it from here," she said, almost to herself. Moments later, the door opened. Agent Maria Sullivan entered, tall, mid-40s, with dark skin and hair cut in a sleek bob. She wore a gray suit that looked both expensive and practical, and her sharp eyes took in the room in a single sweep. "Natalie," she said curtly, then looked at Ethan. "You're the officer everyone thought vanished." "Still here?" Ethan replied dryly. Maria's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Let's keep it that way. What do you have?" Natalie handed over the USB. "Everything tying Richard Parker to the fraud case, transfers, documents, and a confession video from his late sister." Maria inserted it into her laptop, scrolling through the files. "Impressive," she murmured. "If this is authentic, it'll not only clear you, Officer Ward, but implicate several board members of Parker Holdings." Ethan frowned. "Board members? You mean it goes higher?" Maria nodded. "Higher and deeper. Richard wasn't acting alone. This network launders millions through political channels. Taking him down will set off alarms all over the state. Then we have to be faster, Natalie said. Maria looked up. You'll get your justice, but we do this by the book. If we rush, people die. Ethan opened his mouth to reply, but Maria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and froze. Then, slowly, she turned the screen toward them. The message was short, written in capital letters. Tell Ethan to stay out of it, or the girl dies. Lily? The blood drained from Ethan's face. No, he breathed. How? Natalie's hands trembled. Olivia? She said she'd keep her inside. Maria was already moving. Security team, track this number, she barked into her headset. Then, to Ethan, you need to stay put. Let us handle this. But he was already on his feet. If they have her, they won't wait for protocol. Ward, Maria snapped, blocking his path. You walk out that door and you risk the girl's life. Ethan stopped, trembling with fury. She saved mine. I'm not sitting here while they take hers. Natalie grabbed his arm. Then let me come with you. He shook his head. No, stay with Maria. Make sure the story gets out. If I don't come back, publish everything. Maria's gaze softened, just for a heartbeat. You're walking into a trap, she said. I've been in worse, he replied. But I've never had this much to lose. Outside, the sun had vanished behind the clouds again. Ethan ran toward his truck, Rex bounding beside him, barking as if he understood every word. The air felt heavier now, electric with approaching danger. He didn't know how Richard had found them so fast. Maybe Gordon, maybe someone inside the bureau. None of that mattered. He started the engine. Hang on, kid, he muttered, gripping the wheel. I'm coming. And as the truck roared out of Boston, the first drops of rain began to fall, slow, deliberate, like the ticking of a clock counting down to a storm that would decide everything. By the time night fell, Ethan Ward would no longer be the hunted. He would be the storm itself. The highway stretched before Ethan like a scar through the wilderness, each mile of dark asphalt pulling him closer to the heart of danger. The storm clouds thickened again over Massachusetts, the first drops of rain beginning to drum on the windshield. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight the knuckles whitened, his jaw locked in a single thought. Lily. Beside him, Rex sat upright, alert, his amber eyes fixed on the road ahead. The German shepherd's fur bristled slightly every time thunder rolled, not out of fear but anticipation. He could feel his handler's tension, feeding off it, translating it into focus. Ethan's phone buzzed, a text from Natalie. Maria's tracing the signal. Be careful. We think they used a decoy van. He didn't answer. The GPS dot showing Lily's last location blinked faintly on the map, near the old industrial district of Hudson Valley, 40 miles west of Boston, a place that had long since fallen into silence after the mills shut down. Richard Parker's kind of hiding place. By the time Ethan reached the outskirts, the rain had turned into a steady curtain, washing the world in gray. The road narrowed into cracked concrete flanked by rusted fences and skeletal warehouses. Rex shifted, ears pricking up, as the truck's headlights glinted off something metallic. Tire tracks, fresh in the mud. Ethan killed the engine, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out his old service pistol. It had been years since he had used it officially, but his hands remembered the weight. Easy, boy, he murmured, clipping the leash to Rex's collar. We go in quiet. They moved through the shadows of the derelict buildings, rain tapping the corrugated roofs like a warning. The wind carried faint sounds, footsteps, a door creaking, the echo of a child's voice. Ethan froze. That voice, Lily. He motioned to Rex, and they crept closer. Inside the largest warehouse, light spilled through the broken windows, dim, flickering. Ethan peered through a crack in the metal door. Lily sat on an old chair in the center of the room, her wrists bound with rope, a strip of duct tape hanging loose around her neck as if hastily removed. She was frightened but defiant, her small frame trembling more from cold than fear. Across from her stood Marcus Vale, the same scarred enforcer from the pier, and two other men dressed in black raincoats. Vale's left eye, cloudy and pale, made his expression all the more unsettling. He paced slowly, rolling a silver coin between his fingers. You've got guts, kid, Vale said, his voice gravelly. Most people scream by now. Lily's chin lifted. My mom said bad people talk too much. The men laughed. Vale's smile didn't reach his eyes. She was right about one thing. Bad people get things done. Ethan's pulse thudded in his ears. He slipped inside quietly, gun drawn, Rex crouching beside him. The warehouse smelled of oil and mildew, the floor slick underfoot. One wrong step could give them away. He scanned the corners, 2 armed guards near the back door, another pacing near a stack of crates. Vale was the only one unarmed, though the way he carried himself said he didn't need a weapon to kill. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, and for a split second, Vale's gaze shifted toward the door. He smirked. "You can come out, Officer Ward. We've been expecting you." Ethan froze. Damn it. Rex barked once, sharp, protective. The echo ricocheted off the metal walls. Vale raised his hands mockingly. "Hero to the end, huh? Thought maybe you'd be smarter. You walk in here alone, with your dog, and think you can take us all?" Ethan stepped forward, gun leveled. "You underestimate the dog." Rex snarled, muscles coiled, eyes locked on Vale. "Where's Richard?" Ethan demanded. "Busy," Vale replied. "You'll see him soon enough. He wanted to deliver the message personally, but he trusts me to handle the unpleasant parts." "Let her go," Ethan said. Vale tilted his head. "Or what? You'll shoot? Kill me in front of a child?" "No, officer, that's not your style. You're too noble, too broken." He flicked the coin into the air, and the moment it clinked against the floor, chaos erupted. One guard lunged from the shadows, gun drawn, but Rex was faster, a blur of black and tan fur colliding with him mid-stride. The man fell hard, weapon skidding across the floor. Ethan fired at the second guard, the bullet grazing his shoulder and sending him sprawling behind a crate. Lily screamed as Vale grabbed her, dragging her toward the far door. Ethan fired again, but the shot missed, the noise deafening in the echoing chamber. Rex tore away from the fallen guard, sprinting toward Lily. He leapt, jaws clamping onto Vale's arm, forcing him to release her. The enforcer howled, kicking the dog viciously, but Rex held firm until Ethan tackled him to the ground. They fought, brutally close, fists, elbows, the scrape of boots on wet concrete. Vale was stronger, fueled by rage, but Ethan fought with something deeper, purpose. He slammed his shoulder into Vale's ribs, hearing the crack. Vale retaliated, headbutting him hard enough to draw blood. Both men staggered, panting. "You're not a hero," Vale spat. "You're just a ghost chasing ghosts." Ethan wiped blood from his lip. "Maybe, but ghosts don't stop until they're heard." He swung once more, hard, and Vale went down, crashing through a stack of crates. Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights flickered faintly through the rain. "FBI!" a voice shouted from outside. Ethan recognized it, Maria Sullivan. "About damn time," he muttered, lowering his gun. He turned to Lily, rushing to untie her ropes. "You okay?" She nodded shakily. "I knew you'd come." Rex pressed close to her, licking her cheek. She hugged his neck tightly, burying her face in his fur. Maria entered moments later, flanked by agents in tactical gear. Her expression hardened as she surveyed the scene. The unconscious guards, the blood, the rain leaking through the roof. "You really can't follow orders, can you, Ward?" she said sharply, though her voice carried relief. Ethan managed a weary smile. "Not when a kid's life's on the line." Maria's gaze softened briefly. "We'll take it from here. Ambulance is on the way." As medics checked Lily and Rex's minor injuries, Ethan stood near the doorway, rain seeping through the broken panels above. Natalie arrived soon after, soaked but breathless, camera bag slung over her shoulder. "I saw the flashing lights. You found her." Ethan nodded. "She's safe." Natalie's eyes met his, shimmering with pride and worry. "You know Richard won't stop. Not after this." "I know," Ethan said quietly, "but now he knows I won't either." Vale, groaning on the floor as agents cuffed him, muttered through bloody teeth. "You think this ends with me? He's already moving her. The girl means nothing now. It's the proof he wants." Maria crouched beside him. "What proof?" Vale sneered. "The copy, the real one. Eleanor made 2. The words hung heavy in the air. Ethan's heart pounded. "2 copies?" Maria stood, eyes narrowing. "Then we need to find it before he does." Rain hammered the roof harder now, as if echoing the tension building inside. Lily clung to Rex's fur, her small voice trembling. "He said Mom hid something? Something I'd know where to find." Ethan looked down at her. "Do you know what that means?" She thought for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Our secret place. The one at the pier. But there's another one. The place where we used to feed the seagulls when it snowed. She called it our winter hideout." Ethan exchanged a glance with Maria and Natalie. "Then that's where Richard will go next." Outside, the rain turned to sleet, and the sirens faded behind them. The chase wasn't over. It was only changing shape. And as Ethan carried Lily to the waiting car, Rex walking at his side, he felt the storm inside him quiet for just a moment. He had saved the child once. Now he had to save the truth. The morning after the rescue broke with a bitter wind. Frost clung to the glass of the hospital windows, turning Boston into a landscape of pale steel and silence. Inside the recovery ward, Lily lay on a narrow bed, her small hands clutching Rex's thick fur as he dozed at her side. The German shepherd's chest rose and fell with steady rhythm, a sentinel at rest. Ethan Ward sat by the window, exhaustion written deep in the lines of his face. He hadn't changed clothes since the night before. His once pristine police jacket was torn at the sleeve, dried blood marking the cuff. But his eyes, sharp, gray, unyielding, were awake. Natalie Rhodes entered quietly, a paper cup of coffee in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. "You made the front page," she said, setting both on the table beside him. The headline read, "Disgraced Officer Rescues Kidnapped Girl. FBI Investigation Expands." The story painted Ethan as a reluctant hero, a man drawn into chaos by fate and integrity. But he barely glanced at it. "She's stable," Natalie continued, nodding toward Lily. "Doctor said she just needs rest. Olivia's downstairs talking to the social worker." Ethan nodded, his voice low. "She shouldn't have to go through this again." "She won't," Natalie said, then after a pause. "Maria's team traced a vehicle registered under one of Richard Parker's shell companies. Left Boston 2 hours ago, heading north. It stopped near an abandoned estate outside of Concord, private property owned by one of Parker's subsidiaries." Ethan straightened, the fatigue falling away like ash. "The second copy." Natalie nodded. "That's what Maria thinks, and she wants you out of it this time." "That's not happening," Ethan said flatly. Before Natalie could argue, the door opened again. Maria Sullivan strode in, her gray suit immaculate despite the chaos of the past 24 hours. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, her expression as cold as the wind outside. "Ward," she said, "I told you to stand down." "And I told you I don't follow bad orders," he replied, standing. Maria's dark eyes narrowed, but there was no anger, only concern hidden behind professionalism. "You've already risked enough. My team can handle Parker." Ethan crossed his arms. "Your team won't find him if he's got the original files. You saw what he did last night. Hired killers, false trails, surveillance everywhere. He's not running. He's preparing." Natalie stepped between them, tension sharp in her voice. "We're wasting time. Every minute we argue, he's one step ahead." Maria exhaled through her nose. "Fine. But you follow my lead, Ward. No cowboy stunts." Ethan almost smiled. "I'll try my best." 3 hours later, they reached the outskirts of Concord. The estate was massive, a decaying mansion surrounded by skeletal trees, its windows shuttered and its gates half collapsed. Snow dusted the gravel driveway, and the wind carried the faint clang of an old weather vane spinning in the distance. Ethan, Natalie, Maria, and 2 agents moved cautiously through the overgrown courtyard. Rex walked beside Ethan, fur bristling, nostrils flaring at scents too faint for humans. The plan was simple. Maria and her agents would sweep the back while Ethan and Rex scouted the main hall. Natalie stayed by the vehicles with radio contact, ready to transmit evidence the moment they retrieved it. The closer they got, the stronger the smell of damp earth and oil. Someone had been here recently. Ethan pushed open the front door. The mansion's interior was a museum of decay. Dust-covered chandeliers, torn drapes, and furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts frozen mid-motion. Rex's low growl echoed through the marble hall. "Easy," Ethan whispered. "We're not alone." They moved deeper into the house, past portraits of long-dead industrial magnates whose painted eyes seemed to follow them. In the study, a faint light flickered beneath the door. Ethan motioned for silence, then pushed it open. Inside, Richard Parker stood by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in one hand, a pistol in the other. The years had changed him. His hair silvered at the temples, his once handsome face hardened into arrogance. He wore a tailored suit, though the tie hung loose around his neck. There was a tired madness in his eyes, the kind that came from believing one's power was absolute until it wasn't. "Well," Richard said calmly, "if it isn't Boston's fallen angel." Ethan kept his gun lowered but ready. "You've run out of places to hide, Richard." "Hide?" Richard chuckled. "I don't hide, Officer Ward. I build and rebuild. That's what separates us. You chase justice. I make it." Rex growled, stepping forward. Richard's gaze flicked toward the dog. "Still keeping that mutt around? He's more loyal than most people you've known." "Loyalty's the one thing you can't buy," Ethan said evenly. "Your sister knew that." For a split second, Richard's expression cracked. "My sister was weak," he snapped. "She ruined everything because she couldn't keep her mouth shut." "She died protecting her daughter," Ethan said, "and she left enough proof to destroy you." Richard smirked. "Proof? You think what you have matters? That USB you found was a decoy. She hid the real data, the one that connects not just me, but half the people funding this country's politics. Do you really believe the Bureau will survive releasing that?" Ethan's voice dropped. "Try me." From the hallway, Maria's voice cut through. "Drop the weapon, Parker." Richard turned, eyes flashing, and fired, a sharp crack splitting the silence. The bullet struck the doorframe inches from Maria's shoulder. She returned fire instantly, shattering the glass of the fireplace. The room erupted into chaos. Ethan dove behind the desk, Rex lunging toward Richard's arm. The pistol clattered to the ground as the German shepherd clamped down, teeth sinking deep. Richard shouted, trying to wrench free. Ethan kicked the weapon aside, pinning him to the floor. Maria rushed in, her gun trained on him. "Don't move!" But Richard only laughed, even as blood darkened his sleeve. "You have no idea what you've done," he hissed. "Take me in, and you'll bring down every name in that ledger. Senators, judges, your own superiors. They'll bury you before you ever see daylight." Maria's hand tightened on her gun. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Ethan met her eyes. "Then we burn it all down." Richard's smile faltered. At that moment, Natalie's voice crackled through the radio. "Ethan! The transmission's live! I'm sending everything to the press now!" Richard's laughter died. "You wouldn't." "Try me," Ethan said again. Within seconds, the house filled with sirens. Local police, FBI backup, and news crews drawn by Natalie's signal. The lights of dozens of vehicles reflected off the frosted windows, flashing red and blue like judgment itself. As agents cuffed Richard Parker, he sneered, his voice dripping venom. "You think this ends with me? You've started something you can't stop." Ethan leaned close. "You're right. It ends with truth." Outside, Natalie stood beside the van, face pale but resolute as reporters gathered. Maria approached, holstering her weapon. "You just broke half a dozen protocols," she said. Natalie met her gaze. "And you got your man." Ethan stepped into the cold morning air, Rex trotting beside him, Lily's name still echoing in his mind. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest felt lighter. The snow had begun to fall again, soft and endless, cleansing, quiet. He looked at the horizon, where the first light of dawn broke through the gray. "It's over," he said softly. Maria glanced at him. "For now?" Ethan smiled faintly. "That's enough." Rex barked once, tail wagging, as if agreeing. And for the first time since that night on the bridge, Ethan Ward didn't see the water below as a place to end, but as a mirror reflecting the life he'd finally reclaimed. Snow fell over Boston like ash from a dying fire, soft, weightless, unending. The city that had once been Ethan Ward's prison now gleamed like a cathedral under winter light. Weeks had passed since the arrest of Richard Parker. His empire had collapsed in silence, leaving behind a trail of indictments, frozen accounts, and confessions from those who had once called him Sir. But for Ethan, Justice was not the end. It was merely the clearing of smoke after the storm, the quiet that follows chaos, where grief has room to breathe. He stood now outside the courthouse steps, the chill cutting through his dark wool coat. Reporters shouted his name from behind barriers, cameras flashing in the pale sunlight. But Ethan's gaze wasn't on them. It was on the small figure darting down the steps toward him. Lily Parker, bundled in a bright red scarf, her cheeks flushed from the cold. Her laughter rang like bells as Rex trotted beside her, tail wagging proudly. "Uncle Ethan!" she called, and before he could answer, she was in his arms. He lifted her easily, spinning her once, a gesture that, for the first time, felt completely natural. She smelled faintly of cocoa and snowflakes. "They said you're a hero again," she said earnestly. Ethan smiled faintly. "I think I just got lucky." From behind them, Natalie Rhodes approached, her hair tucked beneath a knitted hat, camera hanging loosely around her neck. The wind turned her cheeks pink. "Luck doesn't storm an armed mansion, Ward," she teased. "That was you and this handsome four-legged officer here." Rex barked softly, as if accepting the compliment. His fur shone under the pale sun, the scar on his leg now healed, a reminder of the night he'd charged into darkness without hesitation. He sat proudly at Ethan's side, posture straight, eyes calm, yet sharp. Natalie handed Ethan an envelope. "The official reinstatement letter. The department wants you back. Detective rank, full benefits, back pay." Ethan turned the letter over in his hands. The weight of it was heavy, but not in the way it once had been. "I thought about it," he said, "but maybe it's time to serve differently." Natalie raised an eyebrow. "Meaning?" He looked down at Lily, who had crouched beside Rex, tracing shapes in the snow. "Meaning, I've spent half my life chasing justice and almost forgot what it feels like to build something good. Maybe we start with that." Natalie smiled softly. "You sound like someone I could write a book about." "You already did," he said dryly, nodding toward the newspaper in her bag. A few steps away, Maria Sullivan emerged from the courthouse doors, phone pressed to her ear. Her posture, tall, unyielding, hadn't changed, but her tone carried a rare gentleness as she spoke. "Yes, Director, the files are secure. The investigation's expanding beyond the Parker network." She hung up and approached. "Ward, Rhodes." "Agent Sullivan," Natalie greeted. Maria's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. "You made my life difficult, both of you, but you also made history. The Bureau's cleaning house, and the Attorney General wants to see you both next week." "Are we in trouble?" Natalie asked. Maria glanced at Ethan. "You're both heroes. That's usually worse." Then her expression softened. "Take some time before they pull you back into the storm. The world needs quiet people right now." Ethan nodded. "You ever take your own advice?" "Rarely," she said, and turned back toward the courthouse, her silhouette cutting through the falling snow. A soldier returning to the fight. That evening, the three of them drove to the harbor. The water was half frozen, the sky painted in gold and violet. The carousel near the pier had been restored, its wooden horses gleaming again under new paint. Lily ran toward it, her red scarf trailing behind like a comet. "It's just like before," she shouted. "Mom would love it." Ethan's heart tightened at the mention of Eleanor, but it no longer hurt the way it once had. It was a memory now, sharp, beautiful, complete. He watched Lily place a small bouquet of daisies on the bench where the initials E+L were carved. "For Mom," she whispered, "and for you, Uncle Ethan." He joined her there, the wind cold against his face. "You know," he said softly, "your mother once told me our lives aren't just for ourselves. Every act of kindness echoes. That's what she gave me. A reason to keep walking." Lily looked up at him, her hazel eyes wide. "And you gave it back." Natalie stood a few feet away, snapping a quiet photograph, the man, the child, and the dog framed against the dying light. "That's the picture that tells the whole story," she murmured. As dusk deepened, the carousel lights blinked on, golden, gentle, eternal. Rex barked happily, chasing the reflection of the lights across the frozen pier. His breath fogged in the cold, but his energy was endless, tail sweeping arcs in the snow. He was older now, but still fierce, still pure, the heartbeat of everything that had survived. Later, they sat inside the harbor cafe, the same one Ethan had once passed 100 times without ever entering. The owner, a round man named Patrick O'Connor, had known Ethan since his rookie years. Patrick was in his 60s now, his hair white and thinning, but his spirit still loud and generous. "Well, look who finally came in from the cold," Patrick said, sliding mugs of hot chocolate across the counter. "Heard you took down a billionaire. I'd have charged him double for coffee myself." Lily giggled. Natalie rolled her eyes. Ethan grinned. "Some things don't change." Patrick leaned in, lowering his voice. "Heard the department wants you back. If you ask me, they don't deserve you. But this town does." Ethan lifted his mug. "Maybe I'll stay around a while." As they left the cafe, the night had fully arrived, calm, bright with the reflection of city lights on the water. The bridge where it all began rose in the distance, its steel arches glittering faintly under the snow. Ethan stopped for a moment, watching it. The last time he had stood there, he had been ready to let go of everything. Now, he felt the pulse of life in every breath, every sound. Lily slipped her hand into his. "You're thinking about that night, aren't you?" He smiled down at her. "I am. Do you still hear Mom's voice sometimes?" He nodded slowly. "Every day, but it doesn't hurt anymore. It reminds me I'm not alone." Lily squeezed his hand. "Then she's still here." They stood together, watching the snow fall into the river, dissolving on contact. Rex leaned against Ethan's leg, sighing deeply, the kind of sigh only peace can make. When Natalie joined them, camera still in hand, Ethan turned to her. "So, what happens now?" She smiled, breath visible in the cold. "Now, we write new stories, ones with better endings." Ethan looked back at the city, the lights, the quiet hum of life returning. "Then let's start tonight." And as they walked away from the bridge, 3 figures and 1 faithful dog against the glowing skyline, it seemed the whole world exhaled. Not an ending, but the beginning of something enduring. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come in thunder or fire. It comes in the small things, a child's laughter, a dog's loyalty, a promise kept beneath falling snow. And that night, beneath the Boston sky, Ethan Ward finally understood. He hadn't been saved by justice, but by love that refused to let go. Sometimes God sends his miracles not through thunder or fire, but through the smallest acts of love, a child's voice, a loyal dog, a heart choosing kindness when it could have turned away. Ethan's story reminds us that even in our darkest nights, light still finds us when we open our hearts to grace. Maybe that's how God works every day, quietly, through people who choose compassion over despair. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment to tell us where you're watching from. And write amen if you believe that God still performs miracles in our lives. May the Lord bless you, protect you, and fill your heart with peace. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so together we can keep spreading faith, love, and second chances.